Back at it again with the Mobius Dickus, chapter 60, The Line. So this is a chapter where, you get classic Melville unable to help himself turn an interesting literal object into an interesting metaphorical object. On face, this just seems like a chapter about the type of rope used to secure the harpoon to the whaling boats that are used to go out after the whale. So we have some description of how the line was originally made of hemp, but then the line changes to manila. But ultimately, once we get the description of how much line there is, which is an incredibly long amount of line, it's all wrapped around this tub, then we get this paragraph from our boy Melville, and he just can't help himself. So let's read it. Thus the whale line folds the whole boat in its complicated coils, twisting and writhing around it in almost every direction. All the oarsmen are involved in its perilous contortions, so that to the timid eye of the landsman they seem as Indian jugglers, with the deadliest snakes sportively festooning their limbs. Nor can any son of mortal woman for the first time seat himself amid those hempen intricacies, and while straining his utmost at the oar, bethink him that any unknown instant the harpoon may be darted, and all these horrible contortions may be put into play like ringed lightnings. He cannot be thus circumstanced without a shudder that makes the very marrow of in his bones to quiver in him like a shaken jelly. Yet habit, strange thing, what cannot habit accomplish? Gayer sallies, more merry mirth, better jokes, and brighter repartees you never heard over your mahogany than you will hear over the half-inch white cedar of the whale boat, when thus hung in hangman's nooses. And like the 6 burghers of Calais before King Edward, the 6 men composing the crew pull into the jaws of death, with a halter round every neck, as you may say. So first, Melville uses the language of the line and the imagery of the line to talk about how death or mortality is a condition which is omnipresent for whalemen. This is not necessarily something that we would take all that non-literally. Maybe he's just using fanciful language, which he certainly is, but he's making a point he's made before, which is whaling is super dangerous, right? You're going to face a lot of peril as a whaleman, and part of that peril is having this line that if it starts getting reeled out by a whale, starts whipping everywhere. And of course, rope going at a high velocity can do a lot of damage, tons of damage. But then, of course, Melville can't help himself but show his hand and demonstrate that he is making a point about mortality as an idea that applies to more people than just whalers. In the last paragraph it says, again, as the profound calm which only apparently precedes and prophesies the storm is perhaps more awful than the storm itself. For indeed the calm is but the wrapper and envelope of the storm, contains it in itself, as the seemingly harmless rifle holds the fatal powder, and the ball and the explosion. So the graceful repose of the line as it silently serpentines about the oarsman before being brought into actual play, this is the thing which carries more of true terror than any other aspect of this dangerous affair. But why say more? All men live enveloped in whale lines. All are born with halters round their necks, but it is only when caught in the swift, sudden turn of death that mortals realize the silent, subtle, ever-present perils of life. And if you be a philosopher, though seated in the whaleboat, you would not at heart feel one whit more of terror than those seated before your evening fire with a poker and not a harpoon by your side. So I think that's a rather, pessimistic vision, but, a realistic one. Melville seems to be commenting on the ubiquity of mortality, and not an uncommon thing for literature to comment on. All things come to an end, and even though we as human beings are pretty good at ignoring that fact and living our lives, what Melville is saying is that there is whale line around all of our necks, right? And you might be calm now, but when the whale line starts to pull, your death is imminent. But Melville is saying that everyone's death is imminent. Even if you're sitting at home comfortable by the fire, you are just as imperiled as the person in a whaleboat. So a quick meditation, I don't think necessarily he's saying that much about the anxiety of death or making an argument about it. It's more observational. It's more just stating a fact. And that makes the chapter, I think, a little bit less interesting than some other chapters, but certainly it's a profound image to think of the entangling of mortality that is always wrapped around us, regardless of whether we notice it or not, or whether it is pulling at us or not. I'd like to preview another video we're going to discuss, which is chapter 72, the monkey rope, which is going to take the imagery of rope and deploy it in a very different style. So consider this part 1 of our rope discussion, and when you read chapter 72, keep your eye out for how that discussion of rope is quite different. All right, see you later.